Well, for some analysis, we can bring in Richard Johnson, a lecturer in U.S. politics at Queen Mary University of London. Good morning. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us.
Good morning.
Could you perhaps first just remind us how we got here?
Yeah, so the federal government has to pass discretionary appropriation bills every year. This is the work of the appropriation committees, and for the last couple of years, Congress has failed to do this in a timely manner. And so normally what happens when Congress fails to do this kind of basic responsibility is that there's something called a continuing resolution that's passed, which basically says, okay, we haven't come to an agreement on new spending, so we will just carry on the old. And because the Senate operates under supermajority rules for most legislation, you need 60 votes, supermajority, to overcome a filibuster to pass the continuing resolution. And the Republicans have 53 votes in the Senate. Actually, on this, they only have 52 because Rand Paul from Kentucky, on grounds of being anti-government spending, won't vote for the continuing resolution. So the Republicans need to find a Democrat, and this gives Democrats some leverage to say, well, we're only going to vote for this continuing resolution if you put in a couple of our key priorities. And the Democrats have chosen healthcare to be a ground to fight this on, basically.
And as we often see with shutdowns in the U.S., Republicans and Democrats are each blaming each other for it. Do we have any sense at this point of who's winning that blame game so far?
Yeah, so normally when there's a shutdown, the party in power gets the blame, or particularly the party that controls Congress is expected to get the blame. And here we have Republican majorities in the House and the Senate. And so the expectation, I think, from Democrats has been Republicans will get the blame for this shutdown. And will be able to criticize the Republicans for refusing to maintain the subsidies for Obamacare, which are due to expire at the end of the year, which is the main kind of policy ask of the Democrats. However, the Republicans are basically trying to turn this around and say, look, actually, shutdowns are painful for Democratic voting constituencies, the public sector, cities, those who rely on government activity, which skew, in the Republicans' view, more Democratic. And to sort of add fuel to this fire, Donald Trump has said that he will use his power as the head of the executive branch, where he has some discretion as to the allocation of certain funds and where he can freeze certain funds conditions of a shutdown, to punish specifically Democratic voting parts of the country. So he's announced that he's pulling funds for infrastructure projects in Chicago, which is obviously a very Democratic city, and New York, which of course is the city where both the House Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries and the Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer represent.
And has that pressure been working on Democrats so far?
Not a great deal yet. One way that this could end, well, there are a couple of ways this could end. One is that the Democrats and Republicans agree to negotiations and there's some kind of deal struck on health care. The other is that Republicans just peel off enough Democrats to go their way. Yesterday, we had 2 Democrats vote for the Republicans' continuing resolution, the clean resolution, without any concessions on health care. That was John Fetterman of Pennsylvania and Senator Cortez Masto of Nevada. As I said, you're down one Republican because of Rand Paul. So there are still about half a dozen Democrats that need to come on board. And some of those you may be able to get over just on the basis that they don't think shutdowns are good for the country. They may think that the shutdown is actually not very good for the Democrats. Or maybe Trump might start to target the states of particular Democratic senators who he thinks might be vulnerable on this issue and might come over. And so there are concerns that the Republicans will play hardball with effectively people's jobs and lives to peel off a few Democratic senators.
The way you describe it, it sounds like Democrats are unlikely to emerge sort of victorious from this shutdown. Is that the case?
Well, there is a possibility that the Republicans actually calculate that they cannot get to the 60 line by just, in effect, kind of bullying or putting the pressure on Democrats. That they do need to make some kind of policy concessions. So perhaps you could see some kind of agreement where there's a continuing resolution that has some kind of mild concessions on healthcare. Perhaps the Republicans make a big song and dance about not providing healthcare to undocumented or illegal immigrants in the country, but they agreed to extend Obamacare subsidies for lower or middle class income Americans. I think that's what the Democrats, that's where they're hoping to land. Another possibility is that they just agree to a shorter term solution, basically keep the government over for another 2 or 3 or 4 weeks, and we'll come back to this maybe another way that this gets resolved.
The longest shutdown in U.S. history was during Trump's last presidency. It lasted for 34 days. How long do you think this one's going to last?
It's really impossible to tell. I mean, it could go for that length of time if both sides dig their heels in, and basically there is a way where you could conceive of that, where Democrats think, look, we need to win on healthcare, and the Republicans say we need to win on reducing government spending. But to be honest, I feel that the last time this happened, that very long one you made reference to over the winter of 2018-19, that was over building a border wall, and that to me feels like a more intractable problem than health care actually. That I think you potentially some room for some Republicans to move, particularly on the issue, which is the fundamental one here, which is about Americans. Middle-income Americans, private health insurance premiums going up at the end of the year, and that will happen unless Congress acts, and therefore you may be able to see that you could get the Republicans to think, well, actually, okay, let's give them a bit on this to bring the shutdown to an end. I'm not saying that's the most likely outcome, but I think it's more likely than you were to see on the border wall and some kind of compromise on that.
Yeah, of course, impossible to predict, but it's nice to have an analysis of potential outcomes. Richard Johnson, thank you again so much for your insight this morning. That's Richard Johnson, a lecturer in U.S. politics at Queen Mary University of London.